Hi, so here's a quick little video to kind of show you the functions of this website called Esri. And pretty much what it does is it uses GIS software to create visual maps of lots and lots of data. And so I think it can be utilized in our apes class because it's got a lot of data that has to do with like pollution and population dynamics and stuff like that. So, and AirC also has its own like education section. So if you go to the main website here, www.airc.com, and you click on industries, then under additional industries, you can go to education. And you'll get to this overview page and you want to click on schools. And then when you scroll down here, there's a couple things that I think would be interesting for our APES class to kind of look at if you're a student who's interested in stuff or just needs like another visual to kind of understand some of the topics. So first thing is this ArcGIS software, which is mostly what I think would be the most beneficial for our class. And then there's also the story maps, which I find interesting, and so I'll come back and talk about them in a little bit. But first, you're going to open up this ArcGIS software here, so I'm just going to open up in another tab. And when the page loads, if you scroll down to the very bottom, it has like all the categories that it like focuses on, and the very first one is advanced environmental science. And so underneath it, it has like these activities that have to do with different topics in environmental science, and so they actually go along pretty well with our textbook. So they have things like biodiversity here, or wind power, or El Nino that, or deforestation that could come in handy as a visual for student learning about it. So I chose to focus on the dead zones or the water pollution activity just because that's what we were doing on the time. So at the time, so if you just click the explore button here, it takes you to this sheet, and this is kind of like the activity. It takes like 15 minutes, and it basically, so first there's this map here. So if you open up the URL up here, it has this map that has to do with dead zones and water pollution. And so it's a map, it's a world map, and students can go through these like questions and kind of step-by-step instructions on what to do with the map to kind of analyze the data that the map represents and shows, and how that relates to the topics that we're learning about, like dead zones or watershed areas and things like that. So so here's the map about dead zones, and here's kind of some of the map functions. So it's just kind of a click and drag function to look around the map and kind of change your field of view. There's this zoom in button here, zoom out button here, and then this home button kind of takes you back to the kind of front page of the United States, and this front view of the United States. And then to the side here, you have your legend. And then if you click this little button here, it shows you the contents of the map. And that's where all the layers are. So these layers are really interesting. They have different layers to represent different things. And the worksheet kind of, the activity sheet over here kind of gives you step-by-step instructions on like when to click these layers and what their significance is. So the first layer that it tells you to look at is this World Hydro Reference overlay. So that's what I'll click on first. So when you click on that one here, the major rivers pop up, and also the countries are, presented here. And so if you zoom in, it's got the major rivers here. Mississippi's down here, the Missouri River, the Colorado River, and then if you zoom in, you can kind of see these brown dotted lines here, and that represents the watersheds areas, and the worksheet tells you that. So it's a little tricky to see, and so this is where one of the functions of the map comes in handy. So if you go over here to one of your layers, you can click on these three little buttons and then click on transparency, and then you can tweak how much, like how intense you want to see that layer. So if you still want to see like layers on top of each other and like figure out like, so for example, these are like dark foresty areas versus like the lighter crop areas around here, and you want to see that in relation to like the rivers and the watershed areas, you can mess with the transparency and kind of see, you know, stuff on top of each other and see how they relate to each other. Or you could just turn it off entirely if you just want to focus on this overlay. So that's what's kind of neat. One of the cool functions I thought of the map. So if you keep going through this worksheet, it's kind of a behind the scenes teacher worksheet, and it's got questions and directions, and then it's also got the answers here. So like it's asking about patterns of land cover, and then it tells you like crops in the plains of the Midwest and the forests and your coasts and stuff like that. So you know, if you wanted to assign the students just the questions, and then they'd have to explore on their own on this map. And actually this map function in this website works very well on our Chromebooks, so that's not a problem to do. But if you click on, or if you keep going through this activity sheet here, it eventually talks about, so it's asking, or it tells you to turn on the runoff layer, and so that's this GLDIS runoff. So if you go to the map here, that's what you click right here, and it gives this layer of like blue pixels. And so first you're like, okay, well, it has something to do with runoff, but you don't really know what. So if you go here, this button is for the legend, or if you look up here as well, and it tells you this GLDAS runoff, and then it shows you the legend. And so you can kind of tell that like the darker it gets, the bigger the runoff is. But the kind of annoying part about this is it doesn't tell you the units, so you're not really sure like what these numbers really mean, which is kind of stupid, I think. But it still kind of serves its purpose in saying like higher levels of runoff are the darker blue colors, and you can visually see them around the United States and all over the world if you would care to scroll around. So that's how you like access the key. And then later on it tells you to focus, it focuses in on the Gulf of Mexico and on the dissolved oxygen levels. So it tells you to, so you go back here to the contents and then to turn on this layer, the Gulf of Mexico layer, and it shows up there. So I'll just zoom in here. And on the activity sheet, it tells you that the lighter colors represent lower levels of dissolved oxygen. And then it asks you for the surface area. So you kind of have to approximate it. But what's cool about, and here's another like neat map feature, is this measure button up here. So if you click measure, you can find the area, length, or location like on the map. So if I click here, it's one click on the map, or yeah, so you click the this button here, and then it's like a click on the map to drag and create like a polygon here, and then it tells you, and you double click to release, and it tells you the area right here, and you can mess with the units as well. So that's a cool function, depending on like what you're looking at exactly. That's something that's interesting. And so you keep going through this worksheet, and it asks more questions about like C4 dissolved oxygen. That's another layer that it shows. And so you can keep going through this worksheet, and you know, it tells you how to use transparency and the measure tool. And so it's got all the instructions on here, and a lot of questions, like kind of critical thinking questions that have to do specifically with the map, and then how they kind of tie into the topics that we're doing. So anyway, that's the ArcGIS, and there's these activity sheets for multiple different topics. And then the other cool thing about Esri, this Esri website, is these Esri story maps. So if you just click here in the story maps, so these are pretty much like articles that go along with the map. And and you're also able to create story maps of your own. And so I was thinking about this mainly for monkey points. If some kid was interested in maybe creating their own story map here, it's pretty much so. For example, this one was created by the Southwest Power Pool Incorporated, and it's talking about the transmission lines, and strengthening the electrical grid. So if you click on the story map, like articles, it kind of tells you a little bit about the topic, and then it really relates it to maps, which I think are very interesting and kind of like, real world applications here. So this is talking about the transmission lines. It's a great visual. And so I thought if somebody wanted to do like a monkey point reflection on one of these articles, or if perhaps they wanted to make their own story map, that would be something cool to explore later on. And of course, not all the stories have to do with environmental science. This one's about viewership of college basketball games, but I just thought that would be something if there are, topics that might be related to apes that kids might want to take a look at later on. So that's pretty much the overall uh, functions of that I think would be, related to our class. And yeah, hopefully uh, we can use this sometime, or students can later on. Thanks for watching.